sheep. Welcome to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, revolution.radio. This is Planet Collingwood. My name is Monty Dean. How are you? A big thank you to Why Not and the Y Files and crew. If you enjoyed the last 2 hours, please go to said websites, freedomslips.com and or revolution.radio, and donate what you can. And news just to hand, we have raised $885.54. Interesting. Our monthly goal is $2,000. So if you can chip in, it's the 22nd of April, according to the Pope work schedule here in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Hello from the future. Of course, it is 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States, where the station is actually located. So it's late afternoon here. So Wednesday was quite good. Yeah, it's quite nice. Once you've donated what you can, obviously, within reason. We don't accept children. I'm just pointing that out right now. I've got a cat, and that's enough. You pop into the merch site and buy caps or T-shirts or key rings and so many goodies. I think for North America, you may be able to still get seed packs. I could be wrong, but it's worth checking out. And the wonderful Bruce McDonald actually did purchase a seed pack and has way too much food now. So, he can help out. He's a mountain, not like neighborhood. He actually is on a mountain. Then pop into the chat room with like-minded, like-hearted, just liked people across the board. So how was your weekend? Do you enjoy the Schumann resonance going off like a frog on a sock in a fry pan? It was intense, a bit of shifting forward. There's a new moon about as well. And if you're into the movement of the planets, I think Uranus, or as they say in Futurama, they changed it because everyone would giggle. It's now called Eurectum. That's in a certain place, and so a lot of shifting forward, a lot of reveals and freedom and so on and so forth. And if you'd like to join, obviously it's Freedom Screen on Skype, and or if you're part of my contact list, just send me a message and I'll add you to my to the call. It is Monty_Dean_ silliness. And I'll add you to the call. We have a bit of a chin wag, as we say here in Australia. And on a base level, we'll just fill dead air, which is fun. So we can talk about anything from knitting to the oil global collapse. And like here in Australia, at least, a litre of petrol is under $1. Hasn't been like that since the 90s, maybe even the 80s. So a bit of nostalgia. Member berries. I think it's $1. I saw a photo of $1.12 for a gallon or something interesting or weird like that. And I know President Trump did a press conference today. I didn't actually get to catch it, unfortunately. I know Stephen Crowder was doing a watch along with it, but he was talking about the immigration lockdown, which kind of makes sense. That's just extending the lockdown a bit further out, where stop trying to move people so the virus doesn't move people. Now, just that's the idea that's being put forward. Not sure. You don't have to argue about where, what, and however. Cool. So we've got our first guest coming in. Now I have to find him in my list. There we go. It's been an interesting... Oh, of course it's whited out. So, all right. I'll have to close Skype and then come back. Give me a second. Clear as a bell. I'm not sure what that means. But yes, you sound fine from this end.
Yeah, so we definitely are in for a wild ride. This thing with the oil, this is a big game changer. This was the economic 9/11. It wasn't COVID. I mean, COVID was the trigger, but with oil going negative, nobody's ever seen that before.
No, if I may interject very quickly as well, just a little bit of background for the listeners. The economy was kind of sucking before the virus. As HiJacker just mentioned, the virus just amped it all up, and we're seeing the knock-on effects. And HiJacker, if you can, just very quickly, because I know you're more knowledgeable about this, oil made the world go round, basically, didn't it? And that was tied to the American dollar. So If you could expand a little bit on the importance of oil, just a quick background for the listeners.
Right. So what you got to understand about oil is just not like gasoline. That's actually a byproduct after they make all kinds of stuff out of oil. Oil is in everything. Oil is in agriculture. Oil is in plastic, computers, phones, buildings. Um, it is like the sort of the bedrock. And so basically the whole economy, based on the petrodollar, rests on that foundation. That has now been moved, and the repercussions of it, we don't even know. This is something like out of nowhere. It would be like me telling you 5 years ago that the Federal Reserve is going to go to negative interest rates.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
not only do we got negative interest rates, now we got negative money on the oil. It was down like minus $38 a barrel.
Ooh, yeah,
There are vast ships in the ocean, tankers full, and their only job is to not get caught in a storm. Just move from one side of the ocean, wherever you got to move, where it's the calmest. That's where you need to be. And so, literally, nobody can actually even take any more storage. So we're in a major slowdown. But this is more than that. Um, I don't think these people are stopping. I think they're going to try to push through to go to their basically digital currency, one world order government. Probably the next thing is like religion. We are maybe looking at a war now because right now, particularly Russia, they're getting starved of economic oxygen. I finally heard the number of what the Russians need to break even for their country. And when John McCain basically said Russia is a gas station calling itself a nation, in an economic sense, it is. 75% of the GPA is basically in the energy, oil and natural gas for Russia. They've got to make $42 a barrel to break even. And so what are they going to do now? They're getting starved off, and they're on a clock now. I mean, yeah, they got gold reserves. They got maybe, I think, 450 billion in reserves. They can live off of for a little while, but it's going to be bad. And then you take Saudi Arabia, the way their economic model is set up, they're break even in the sense that it doesn't cost them this much to pull it out of the ground, but between the way their society is set up, and because all these princes have got, like 20 wives, like bin Laden, he had like 66 brothers or something like that, 19 wives or whatever. Saudi Arabia, they got all these families they pay off, make work state jobs, and so they got at least $80 a barrel to keep their society together. That's about to implode, and it's the same with the Gulf states. Venezuela, that's where they get their money. No more money. They can't even sell it. So okay, Monty, looks like you got a heavy hitter here, Mr. Rowe. Go ahead.
I was just going to add very quickly, and then I'll introduce the Roro, as I like to call him, because that's how we roll, or roll. No, I'm being silly now. A couple of headlines I saw is that Australia is actually stockpiling oil in the US. I didn't read the article because half these are, 80% of the articles is just fluff. But I found that interesting. So it's be interesting to see how that pans out. Also, very quickly, if no one's making money and they're borrowing money to try and keep society afloat, you can see that disaster further down. And please welcome Mr. Rowe. How are you, Mr.? If your microphone's working. You are unmuted, but we can't hear you. As you can hear, Mr. Rowe is
It
working
must be your
feverishly.
headset or something, Mr. Rowe, some plug or whatever. But I don't need to tell you because you're an IT guy and you're going to figure it out
How about
just
now?
about in 1
There
minute.
we are. There we
There
are.
we go.
Okay, no. Hey, the only thing I can say is today, I don't know if you saw the little, they have their little task force conference, and of course, Fauci wasn't there. By the way, what's her name? That scarf lady is a colonel or a lieutenant colonel, used to be at least. Anyway, that's not the point. When Mnuchin was speaking, he was mentioning about the oil, and he says, yeah, something along the lines of, and if you saw that the first day of oil futures traded in the negative today, they had the most shit-eaten, smirky grin on Donald Trump and Mnuchin's face. They actually chuckled. They're like, yeah, I traded in the negative. And Trump kind of went, this was a salvo. This was the faction that Trump is on, hitting back and doing exactly what they intended to do, is drive oil into the ground. One of the reasons I believe is because they are online for a worldwide paradigm shift. They want to destroy the petrodollar. Yes. They want to bring the banking system down. Yes. It is an international thing. Yes. They are driving a nail into the heart of the old system by doing this. Do you know how many oil tycoons are like ripping their hair out? That old system, and it's not that there isn't oil. It's an artificial. It's not an artificial shortage like diamonds. It's actually, well, kind of is, but now we have so much of a surplus, like Jacker was saying, that sitting there. Well, that's enough reserve to make the shift over. I'm sure that Russia is prepared. I'm sure that the United States is prepared as far as technology that's locked away, that's been suppressed. How many stories have we heard about the oil companies buying out the guys that invent the car that runs on water, or the carburetor that gets such and such? Because all they are is old school profit driven. They do not want to advance the paradigm.
YouTube videos of 16-year-olds creating free energy devices in their garage. Even I've come up with an idea. I don't have any funding or a white coat, but imagine if I had funding, we could use salt water as a source, because if you send, my understanding, and until someone says I'm wrong, you send a small electrical charge into a water molecule, you split the hydrogen and the oxygen, and both of them can burn. Now we have a salt problem, obviously, but still, imagine if I had 10 years of funding to explore that, where you could use water. Well, someone that is used to the water, because I'm sure he was in a longboat, we've been joined by the Viking. Viking, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, gentlemen. How are you?
Yeah, good. I survived the weekend.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But could you add to the oil and maybe venture into the economic side of things? Because I know you follow the markets.
Yeah, well, Mr. Rhodes, right. It's definitely a broadside to the deep state. I mean, we let go of all of our guns at one time here. And it's a game changer. I mean, I was saying in February, the system has to crash and burn. Well, we've been in free fall now for about 3 weeks. We're about ready to crash and burn in the next 3 weeks. And he is in. And again, I will concur. The Trump team is definitely navigating this. They're bringing this to a point where, I mean, I would be spending trillions of dollars just as fast as I could, knowing that in the times to come, the fiat currency is going to be null and void. It's going to be absolutely garbage. And why not spend as much as you can to rebuild the infrastructure? Part of bringing the system down is crashing your own market. Even the United States, it costs, as Jacker was pointing out, $42 to create a barrel of oil. And these banks are heavily invested with loans and derivatives in this market, and they are absolutely going nuts. I mean, they are freaking out. And we're going to start seeing, depression-style suicides with people jumping out of 40-story windows here. This is how bad it is. This is how bad it is. This never happened ever in the history of the United States or the world. This was like check on this 5D chessboard, and I'm actually excited at this point. I see how again, and the petrodollar, you almost got Jacker. The petrodollar means that every barrel of oil in the world is traded with our dollar. Since the oil is worth nothing, our dollar is worth nothing, and people are going to start recognizing this worldwide that they're going to start trading in. The ruble, for example, is backed in silver. The renminbi is backed in gold. Why the hell would you be using the U.S. dollar? This is another part of the puzzle here, which is going to cause a complete and utter collapse of our currency. And this is what he wants. He wants it to be absolutely worth nothing, so he can spend as much as he can in the next 3 months, and then he's going to shut down the Federal Reserve. It's already been absorbed into the Treasury. It's a matter of time before he basically just does away with this fiat currency and goes to a gold-backed note, the U.S. Treasury note.
Yeah, there is interesting to see how the anti-Trump people are reacting, because they think he's Hitler 2.0, and I don't see that. I'm aware of, we have to be vigilant and see what's actually happening. What I'm getting is, from what Mr. Rose said, if they're smirking and giggling, their ego is so big that they would actually have an agenda or plans afterwards. They're not like, say, the Clintons, where if they can't have it, they'll burn everything to the ground. There would be a saving plan, or however you want to describe it. Interesting thing is we still have to be vigilant and point out where it's not beneficial for us, because there seems to be I would say, where's the place, I can't remember the state, I do apologize, is it Michigan, or everyone's protesting the lockdown, but they could be being driven by provocateurs. Mr. Rowe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, Michigan is one of the states. But, remember that the Federal Reserve, oh, by the way, not only the Federal Reserve, but they're going after the BIS, Bank of International Settlements. So This is a worldwide global thing. And remember that our Federal Reserve note, or actually I should say their Federal Reserve note, has lost about 95% of its purchasing power since, let's say, about 1913. Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
1933, whatever. So $1 should be worth about $100 in buying power of today's prices. So if this old system collapses and they reissue let's say a United States note, whether it's based on gold, or maybe it'll be based on a rare earth material, maybe it'll be based on something else, who knows? Maybe it'll just be backed by the full faith and credit of the new government. But whatever it is, it would probably have more buying power, purchasing power, than the old system. So let's say $1,000, that would have about $100,000 worth of purchasing power in today's prices. And we'd roll back to the way the system was set up originally, when a cup of coffee was a nickel or less than a nickel, and it wasn't like $4.
Well, I think that would be because I'm speculating. They were going to leave the system behind, so all the debt will stay in the old system. So when they start up the new system, the debt won't follow, and so it could be maybe a jubilee or something like that. But that's what I would do. You leave that system to collapse under its own debt, and then you bring in a new system which is not connected to it at all. And you imagine governments not having all that debt, and prices will drop dramatically. They may actually start repealing taxes. Now, I know I'm going a bit fantasy woo-woo, but still, go ahead, Viking.
No, I mean this is part of the SARA Act. I strongly believe that we're heading into some semblance of its creation, and part of it is so Trump is not just trying to unify the United States; he's trying to unify the entire world on a global economic standard. It's called Basel III, Then it was implemented. What?
Did you see there was what you're saying? You're correct, by the way, that he's trying to unify the world. I believe part of it was so that we can actually move off of the planet. And he did an executive order about mining on the moon and in outer space.
Yeah.
And now the next move is if we want to move off of this world and then start doing things, extra non-planet, then we need to unite the world into a global force.
Right.
That's so.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, that's going to be if you look at this new paradigm, but we have to get to where the transit, even this new economic structure that's going to be made available to us, which again is Basel III, and Basel III is the world all the countries have to have 40% of their currency backed by gold, and the rest of it is assets being agriculture, industry, tourism, in-ground resources, which are your precious metals, etc. And then there's going to be this reset. Everything has to be because the entire world is I think it's $4 quadrillion is what the debt load is. And there's no currency. There's no absolute currency existing. This is a debt system based on toxic derivatives, bad loans, and countries that have been usurped by these paramilitary leaders that are just raping their natural resources. It's gone haywire. So what's going to happen here is it has to, as I said, crash and burn. It has to collapse. The world economy has to collapse in order to do a reset in this new gold standard, this Basel III, and then we can start to create a world trade or economic liquidity, on some stature. As far as mining, first of all, the moon's not even a planet. It's a satellite that was brought in to stabilize and equalize the atmosphere of this planet here. The mining that will occur will be most likely on asteroids, and the asteroid belt is rich in gold and whatnot, and they're already mining. The Nazis are already mining the asteroid belt. So the moon, I think he had to put that out there to give kind of a futuristic vision. To go beyond that, we wouldn't be able to handle it. But I think in the next 5 to 7 years, you're going to see the economy change again. It's going to go more into a galactic Ubuntu, where it's going to be more based on trading your resources rather than dealing in dollars. So it's very exciting. And we're seeing the end of this huge dead horse finally losing its last breath.
Well, it started in 2007, 2008, basically, and the only reason that the economy is working now is that humans are creating it out of faith. Because everyone believes that a dollar is a dollar. Going back to what Mr. Rose said about the purchasing power of the US dollar, the movie Zeitgeist, which was released in 2007, around that time, they pointed out a dollar in 1913 would be the equivalent of $127 in 2007. So who knows how much it would be now? Which is why everything's through the roof. And quick question. Hopefully it's a short answer, but who do we owe it to?
Exactly. It's just a bunch of people that say that we owe it to, and somebody that I didn't agree. I didn't sign my paper to this thing. Somebody else, bad management, and they made these contracts. So, but really, what are they going to do if we don't pay? I mean, do they have these little private armies that are going to come out and stomp us? Or are they going to come break our arms? I mean, what are they going to do?
Well, how are you going to pay that army?
Release a deadly virus?
Yeah, well, yes, but, there's divine intervention involved there. Go ahead, Viking.
Well, to answer your question, it's the central banks and the IMF basically hold the note on all these debts, which are, again, the deep state, Rockefeller, Rothschild regime that created the whole debt. You know, it was brought into existence in 1871 and then finalized in 1913 when they brought in the Federal Reserve, and all the central banks around the world kind of had their birth. And then we've been under this usury system, this Babylonian draconian economic system ever since. Well, it's been actually happening for quite a while since they created the actual note back in England, and in the Roman days too. They had the same system where they're aggregating the banks were aggregating their holdings. So it's been part of the times. But as far as it coming to an end here, it just has to collapse. The whole system has to collapse. It's going to crash and burn, and what's going to come out of it has already been negotiated. We already have our U.S. Treasury notes printed. We have the gold to back it. It's just a matter of just absorbing. And I mean, you have these banks that are absolutely, you got, for example, Deutsche Bank, which is the largest bank in almost in the world, has $25 billion in assets, but over $50 trillion in toxic derivatives. I mean, it's bankrupt. All these banks are bankrupt, and they have this big facade, as you're pointing out, of confidence that the people have just they live in a bubble. We've been, I've been under the yoke of the IRS, where if you don't pay this, they're going to go in and clean your bank account out. That's happened to me about 3 times, and it's like they have this power over us. There's a power that you have to lockstep in with their structure, or they will defeat you. Well, as being pointed out here, if there's no power behind them, then they have no kick in their step. And I'm really getting excited to see where this whole thing is going to manifest. It's going to be hard for a lot of people, but ultimately it's only going to be hard for those that have invested heavily in the system.
Yeah, well, there is one marker, so to speak, in the Q column, and that is with what President Trump did as far as making sure that the farmers, the food producers, the distributors, that the food's not going to actually rot, because of this COVID, turns out a lot of people eat out, and it's like half of our food supply actually go to like restaurants. I mean, it's really, I knew it was big coming from a restaurateur family, but I didn't know it was that big. But anyways, the federal government is going to start buying those foods, onions, that type of thing, so they just don't rot in the field, and they distribute them to these people.
You know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
There is, the other side is trying to initiate an artificial famine. This is one of their salvos that they're shooting at us. They're trying to, and Trump, and they're trying to starve out a lot of the American people by creating artificial shortages. Now, it's interesting because if you listen to Trump again on the speech today, he was talking about the invisible enemy. Now, he mentions the invisible enemy, which is different sometimes when he's talking coronavirus or whatnot. But anyway, so he says, yeah, we've been making very good progress against the invisible enemy. And we've been fighting, and we're fighting a good front, something like that. And then he says, and I tell you, I see light at the end of the tunnel. There's light at the end. He repeated it, light at the end of the tunnel. And that made me think about, like, yeah, we're not seeing all those tanks and things. The last we saw, they were sitting in quarries, which are places where they dig holes. So I wonder if there truly is light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe these underground cities are being raided with massive amounts of firepower and armed, soldiers that have been training to fight subterranean warfare, as we're all aware of. So that's just another, I thought it was an interesting choice of words that he used. And they seemed quite upbeat today. And he said something else. He said, oh, yeah, I don't know what it is yet. But he says, we'll be releasing some interesting information today. And so that should have broke already. And also the other day, the WHO, I believe the Bill Gates Foundation, and possibly the CDC were all hacked their emails, and all of their email passwords were put out. So a lot of Anons have been pouring through some of that data, which should be manifesting in the next few days.
I have seen a lot of people learning more about Bill Gates, where he's not the person he seems. I've seen his TED talk where he basically, I'm going to misquote the statement, but he believes that we're overpopulated and we can change that through vaccines. Now, anyone with critical thinking,
really good job. If we do a really good job with vaccines, we can lower that, which he meant the P equaling people, down to 0. Go ahead.
Yeah, and also in that talk as well, he put forward the example of, say, your grandmother is on life support and she's eating up the money. Well, we could turn off the machine and pay 4 teachers. And so that's why I started calling Bill "Let's Kill Grandma Gates," and because he's just doing it, he slides it in. There's no demonic sort of "and I will kill them all." He just slides it in and just keeps going because he's awesome. Everyone's completely oblivious to what he's saying, and I still maintain we are not overpopulated. We are just under very bad management, and that's why that's a factor of why the economy is going to collapse, because it's a mathematical conclusion where you cannot do what they've been doing, and just the greed where I mean, the face of it is the Rothschilds that are connected to the central banks. I'm going to pick a number and say if you've got over $50 million, you're fine. Like, really, unless you want to clone Elvis. How are you going to spend all that money? Like billionaires. Have you seen Virgin is slowly collapsing and they want bailouts from the government? It's like, you're a billionaire. You're fine. This is
I think I forget what, maybe it was a hotel chain or whoever. It was someone, not Virgin, but some other company. And it came up again to Trump. And they're like, whatever company just got such and such millions of dollars. And Trump says, yeah, and they're going to pay it back. He's all, that shouldn't have happened. And they don't need it. And I'm telling them right now, you're going to pay it back. We want the money back.
Well, I think he's the right man for, because people bring up with Trump, he's been bankrupted a couple of times. Well, that's he himself wasn't, but I'm sure businesses that he was attached to. But that's part of the business world where sometimes things go bust, and you have other aspects where he's still afloat and he's still got all the billions of dollars and real estate and everything else like that. He seems to be, if our choice was Hillary or Donald, he seems to be the right one for the business side of things of what we're seeing.
Well, he is a master of bankruptcy. He absolutely knows how to use it to his favor. So who else would you want in charge right now but this master in economics, knowing how and where and when to pull the trigger to be able to create stability, because he really wants overall, drain the swamp and make America great again. That's his campaign's slogan. He wants the infrastructure to be recreated and redefined in this country, so we become a sovereign nation. It's all about being sovereign. Back to our constitutional rights.
Yeah, it's literally a restructuring of the company, because the company now, the corporate United States, is going to be dismantled and restructured into a new model. Yeah.
Absolutely. And people don't realize that it is United States of America Incorporated, with its seat in Washington, D.C., which is not even part of the United States. And this is where you've got the Federal Reserve being a corporate seat in Puerto Rico, corporate office in Washington, D.C. And it's not even, and they're basically strangleholding, the United States in their in the maritime law. It's not, this has all been a subterfuge created to absolutely to keep us in debt slavery. Debt slavery has been their modus operandi, and stratagem for over 100 years.
I think also when it does happen, however it plays out, people like ourselves should have about 3 seconds of joy and celebrate like, that's fantastic, and then get really hard on Trump by going, what are you doing? What are you doing? Is this going to hurt someone? Are you transparent? Just because of the exposure of the old system and total corruption, a lot of people will lose faith in most things. And if you look at Trump in the last 4 years, how the media and everyone's been hammering because they don't like him as a person, there's going to be a backlash of sorts. And so we don't join that backlash, but we actually critique him not even harder, but you understand what I mean, where we don't go, oh, he's fine, he knows what he's doing. It's like, we sort of stand over his shoulder and like, is that right? Is that the betterment for everybody? You know what I mean? It's our next mission after getting away from this system is to make sure the next system isn't exactly the same.
Yeah,
Well,
show.
You seem a bit off mic, and you're breaking up there, bro.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. There was sort of a reset about 200-ish years ago during this time, maybe a little earlier, when we were coming out of what a lot of people believe was the age of Tartaria, and the mud flood stuff, when Nikola Tesla tried to bring us to what is referred to as an etheric model of the universe, as opposed to a quantum model. Now, the difference being is the etheric model is the spiritual way, is the carbon-based affinity to the magic, if you will, the harmony of the spheres, the way the universe, our interaction with nature, because we are creatures of carbon-based constructs here in this reality. Now, the opposite, the quantum mathematical side, is the structured square wave silicon-based affinity. And this is the digital way that we have embraced. Unfortunately, we should have gone with the analog, and now we are suffering the consequences and going down this quantum direction, and we're seeing things like transhumanism. We are not meant to merge with silicon. We are not meant to be machines. So we need to abandon this path, and we need to shift back over to the etheric model, to the spiritual way. And I believe Nikola Tesla was truly the keeper of the etheric flame, if you will, and the Tartarian Empire did have the right direction. I don't know what happened, but we definitely have forgotten a lot. I'm going to do a show, by the way, on Thursday on my show about the origins of San Francisco, and it's not what you think.
Oh, nice. Mr. Rowe, have you seen the latest Star Trek season, which is Star Trek Picard?
No, I haven't. I've been meaning to, but so far I have not seen it.
Okay.
No.
Brace yourself. You may throw things at the TV. It is so anti-Star Trek. It is not funny. I think 86 people get horribly killed over the 10 episodes. And I'll give you a spoiler because it goes back to the transhumanism.
Yeah.
Picard dies from a brain disease. However, they capture they copy his brain print, the electrical side of it, and they put him into an android. And yeah, so basically Picard's turned into a Cylon. The thing is, though, sorry,
he's a Data now.
Yeah, basically, Data's in there as well, but I'll leave some non-spoilers for you. But the thing is, if from a spiritual point of view, they've just taken the electrical and chemical makeup of the brain and just made him a copy. So Picard technically is dead, but the android is just a copy of him because, especially in Star Trek, because they've never been spiritual. They meet spiritual beings and they transmute, but they're always science-based. Picard's soul never transferred.
Ah, okay. You remind me of one more thing. We're talking about, going off the oil and moving on to new technology. There is unclassified, presented by the Russians several years ago, I believe it was in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, at the Geneva, Switzerland Technology Conference of some sort. They have these things. a lot of cool stuff goes on in Switzerland. But anyway, so the Russians are there, and they said, they demonstrated, they showed that they have the patent on how to transmutate molecular structures. You can turn tin into gold. You can turn lead into aluminum or into any other metal that you want. You can transmutate without nuclear radiation. In fact, it's a chemical process. And, right now, the process, I'm not sure how long it takes, but it's a relatively short amount of time. But it does take up a little bit of space. It's about the size of a room, they said, that the device. But we have now the ability to not only do the things that we don't know about with the secret patents, but to already transmutate metals. So if you need a rare earth metal, if you need gold, if you need silver, well, you just make it out of something that you have readily available, like waste trash metal.
Yeah. But I'm going to bring up a lot of pop culture references. In Back to the Future 2, instead of using plutonium, which was part of the plot from the first film, Doc Brown just goes to the garbage and picks up like a banana peel and complete rubbish, and it's called Mr. Fusion. And they get the energy out of that, and then they can travel through time because they've obviously got the technology of finding a spark of life or whatever it is in that. An addendum to that is as well, I've been saying occasionally over the years, and I'll say it again, we can save this. The information to save the planet is already out in the public. The controlling factors don't want people to know about, and they have to stick to oil and coal and plastics, as going back to the start of the show where HiJacker was pointing out the petrochemical aspect of things. For just plastics alone, you can move to hemp. And you can design something that could last forever, or you can design something that if it's out in the sun for 90 days, it biodegrades and it breaks down. The thing is, and I've seen this on Joe Rogan, where these things, there's options to it, but the people in charge don't want to use them.
Yeah, it could be a much better world. Absolutely. HiJacker's been kind of silent. What do you think?
I'm taking it all in. So let me go ahead and play devil's advocate for a second, especially with Trump. So this is my theory. My theory is that President Trump, Donald Trump, he started off noble, good, really incredible campaign speeches. I mean, he, outdid Kennedy by 100 in some of those speeches. But then basically something happened. Whether they had something on him, don't know. But my theory is that he's been captured. And so let's take a look at it from another point of view. So here we are before President Trump. Obama couldn't release all kinds of military hardware to the law enforcement. And with the stroke of a pen, President Trump releases $100 million in surplus little rocket launchers, MRAPs, all kinds of basically surplus military hardware to the domestic law enforcement. So let's take a look at this latest bailout bill, the 6.2 trillion. Corporations ended up getting all kinds of money, even Harvard, who's got like the endowments of $100 billion or something. I mean, they didn't need the money. The millionaires, like 44,000 of them, multi-millionaires, they're all going to get a check for like $1.6 million. Meanwhile, the normal tax-paying, Joe or Jane, we get our little measly $1,200 check. Oil's now hit where we're not going to be the reserve currency of the world. We've got the poor and the working poor, 30 million unemployment. Now they think the number is. I think President Trump actually used that 30 million are now basically at food banks trying to get enough food to basically survive. you take a look at um, let me think. I'm trying to think. I just lost it. But my point is, if you actually do the inverse of what QAnon says and what your theory on what Trump is doing and bringing the system down, um, you see the exact opposite. More draconian laws, the red flag laws. He didn't need to say that stuff. He didn't need to let that go. And now all of a sudden, all these states are basically, uh, coming up with these red flag laws. Even all these hardcore left wing governors. I'm in a state that's got one of those guys. He's empowered them, even though he acts like he fights against them. He's empowered them. Nobody's been arrested. I mean, and it looks like our lives are just, go ahead.
That's constitutional. He's letting them hang themselves. Go ahead.
Right. No, I get to thinking, but I'm just taking a look around and I'm thinking, everything is getting really, really dark. Uh, not, letting Google, basically, we remember what Google was like 5 years ago. You could scan the earth. You could do all kinds of searches and research. Now, if you try to do research on something, the actual algorithms of Google will give you the opposite. And it doesn't matter where you look. Facebook, look at the censorship. Doesn't say anything about that. I mean, just everything just keeps getting denigrated, worse and worse and worse. And at the same time, because he has this type of tension or conflict with the media, it's almost like theater. And so I just don't see it the way you guys see it. And I can only hope you're right, because at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a universal vaccine, mark of the beast, digital currency.
Jack, absolutely see your point. I totally, absolutely agree with what you're saying, except for the point at the very beginning where he's been compromised. The reason why you're correct on everything that you've just said is because that's the other side. That is the faction that he's fighting against. If they get their way, that's exactly where we're going. We're going down that road, and it's a dark road.
But man. Mr. Rowe, why would he fill all these banks, even foreign banks? Now the Federal Reserve is actually operating in 9 countries. It used to be the United States Federal Reserve.
If I may, possibly, and I'm playing the what if card. Possibly, he's trying to extend, instead of having everything like in a car crash. He's turning off the engine and letting the car roll. I hope that's a good analogy. Because it's interesting. Like I've seen people where it's New World Order, but then you have the other side saying it's freeing humanity, and it's interesting. Is Trump doing, as the Viking used to say, doing a bit of rope-a-dope, where he's doing the punches and he's shifting everything? So
no, I see Viking's point. Bix Weir, basically Bix Weir, Viking. They're basically saying, look, if you know the system's going to crash, milk it for everything you get. If you got to make compromises and buy off corporations or, banks and make them think that everything's going good, and meanwhile you're just draining that thing. They did another $500 billion today.
I just had a thought, if I may, HiJacker. What if Trump is being sneaky, giving people, the corporations, all this money, and then changing the system where their money is completely useless and they can't use it?
Well, yeah. I can see the flip side. I can see. I'm a warrior. I know different methods of war, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, that type of thing. So it could be, but now we're down to the point to where, unless there are mass arrests, and I don't know how they're going to do it without actually using Russian assets as well. I mean, Putin's going to have to jump in this fight if we're going to overturn this deep state. Those two powers, U.S. military and the Russian military, Putin and Trump, they could do it. So they could flip this whole thing like in the twinkling of an eye. and all this other stuff that they gave up ground was tactical, strategic. So, but that's the problem I'm having. It's just like, for 2 years we heard Q say trust Sessions, and yet President Trump will not endorse him in a Republican primary in Alabama for the U.S. Senate. Why is that? I mean, there's.
Yeah. The only other thing that it's really got all of this theater, if you will, because at the end of the day it is theater, could all be subterfuge to cover for those 2 or 3 damn rocks in the sky. They got Comet Swan and another one. I don't know. Something's going to be here on the 29th. So if we get into May 1st, then I'll deep breath. But I often wonder if it's also, something else.
Yeah, I mean, Comet Swan. Look at the mockery. Enjoy your swan song.
Exactly.
Even the 5G. Well, we know what that does. We know what that does to the human body and the brain. Like if you got a microwave, you shouldn't even stand in front of it because some of the waves actually come out and they affect the soft tissue of the eyes.
Yes.
You're around, you use microwaves all the time, and your eyesight's going to start to go. But so
Trump.
Right. And so Trump is basically saying we want 5G. And now we're finding out during this lockdown, they're putting 5G up in like every damn school, all along the street. And the cute people say, no, they can actually use that weapon against them. Okay, well, I don't know enough about it, but all I know is
5G is just a means of transmission. It's how it's being loaded. It's being loaded right now at 60 hertz, which is being weaponized. You can use the 5G towers with a different harmonic frequency to actually create a healing pulse or a light pulse, or a greater means of transmitting digital numbers in some sort of quantum financial system. It's how you use 5G. Right now, it's being weaponized, but it can turn against them. That's exactly right. And also, as far as us, bailing out these banks around the world, we're not doing that. That's the central banks, which the Federal Reserve is part of. So they're basically lending us money for our bailout, but they're also bailing out all these countries. That's not the United States. That's the Federal Reserve on its own admission, doling out these fiat currencies. It's absolutely crashing the market. It's creating a hyperinflation, and it's going to turn into one of the worst depressions that we've ever seen. But
yeah, and there's my other point. No, I get
in this transition. You just have to be totally self-sufficient for about 3 months. You have to be self-sufficient.
Is there any other
problem, Viking? Go ahead, Mr. O.
Just a question. Does anybody know if there's any other countries other than America that are giving out like a stimulus package?
Yes, but we're at the break, so I'll keep you in suspense. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, revolution.radio. This is Planet Collingwood, Open Roundtable. I'm Monty Dean. You're awesome, and we're 100% listener supported. So if you can donate what you can, a cup of coffee here and there, it will help us all. We will be back after this break for our second hour. Stick around.
All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Monty Dean. This is Planet Collingwood Open Roundtable. You are on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com and or revolution.radio. If you enjoyed the last hour, please go to the website and donate what you can, because we're 100% listener supported and we're all volunteers. So
yeah, with that, Monty, let me just do a plug real quick, because we got really high numbers for a late night roundtable at this time. So if you're a new listener out there, we are listener supported, and go to either freedomslips.com or revolution.radio. And there should be a place where you can actually donate to whoever the we've been messed with PayPal. They locked up the account. We've been like deplatformed, as they call it. These different, pay-as-you-go type things. They've just, I mean, they really put it to us. And then if you want to donate without anybody knowing it, there's probably a physical address of either Lady Horse or Willow. Mr. Rowe, you would know more than I do, because you're part of the management team. But
Yeah,
you can put some money in tinfoil and actually send it anonymously. But we are listener supported, and we need at least a couple grand every month to survive. And we're coming to the end of the month, and we don't even have half. So
it does look like we're going to be able to have the archives online very shortly. I'm not going to give a time frame, but it's been quite a while, and we've been making huge amounts of progress. Big shout out goes to Tones for helping out, and so things are going to be starting to roll a little better here. We're getting the bandwidth issue resolved, and that's going to help the archives big time. So that's right around the corner.
Right, yeah. And listen, you're not going to be able to hear the type of information that we have, that we basically traffic in, whether on one side of an issue or another. You're not even going to hear the information, because once you get so big, like an Alex Jones, you are forced to become a gatekeeper, or they'll kill you. They will kill you. Alex Jones, he can't go into a lot of the stuff that we go into. They allow people like us to do what we do because we're small, and that's the only way you're going to actually hear the information. Once you get so big, let me put it this way. Here's a story, real quick story. So I got on terrestrial radio. This was like 10 years ago, and I think it was on like the Ron and Don show or something. It was like, they got like in the afternoon drive, they got something like, a million listeners or whatever. Anyways, I was able to get through. It was when, long before, it was before Revolution Radio. And so I basically was able to get through and relay my story on how I used my children, I used them to basically jump the system, where none of them actually went to high school. And this host, he wasn't cued in that he was not supposed to talk about stuff like this. But he goes, well, how did you do that? 5 children and none of them went to high school? You jumped them? What are you talking about? You jumped them. And so I said, well, I gave him some different ID and basically ran him right to college. I ran one as young as 12, and the teacher thought he was just like way too young. And he came to me and says, Dad, she thinks I'm way too young. I said, well, just say your nickname is Babyface. That's what all the kids call you. And anyways, he came home that day. He goes, it worked, Dad. She believed it. Once I said my nickname was Babyface, he's 12 years old and he's already doing his GED, right? So I jumped all my kids. So I relay the story until they realize that I'm actually telling everybody out there, like, 500,000 people on terrestrial radio, on how to avoid, basically what happens to children when they get into high school. Their hormones are going. All they want to do is just like bump bellies and drink beer and be with girls, and it corrupts them. It's just like total corruption. Anyways, so they finally cut me off. I went too long. And they said, no, we can, this information, this is dark knowledge. So later that night, I'm coming out of the bathroom, taking a bath, getting ready to go to bed. I'm walking towards my bed, and I hear this pop against the window. And these were like old windows, this place that I was staying at, that had the metal frame. It was like metal in between the plate glass. It was like a 3-pane plate glass, older window. This guy really built this house, by the way. And so I said, what the hell was that? Was that a bird that hit the window or what? So anyways, I just had to know. The next morning I went out and I actually looked, because where it popped was right as I was getting ready to get into bed and lay down, basically chest level. And so I went outside the next day and looked at it, and I saw this big dent right in this beam that separated the plate. And yeah, I could tell it was fresh. And I says, what the hell hit that? A bullet? I mean, and I thought, bullet would ricochet off that. And so anyways, I looked around to try to find it. And I couldn't find it. Anyways, I realized that it was probably a rubber bullet that just happened to hit that little part. Also, by the way, one of the reasons why I went out and checked the window is because no sooner did that hit than I heard a car drive away from the house. It's like out of nowhere, and I thought that's really odd. So, anyways, a couple of months later, I'm in a Subway or some kind of eatery place, and I'm saying, because I was convinced then it was probably a rubber bullet, and that somebody was sending me a message because I knew I did damage to them. I could feel it in the spiritual realm about how I jumped my children out of high school. Anyways, and then it happened, that night. And so a couple of months later, I'm in an eatery and there's a cop there, and I says, and then I struck up a conversation. I says, look, I was just curious. Do normal bullets, they got signatures and everything, right? Barrel or whatever. He goes, oh yeah. You fire a bullet, it's got a signature. I says, well, what happens if you fire a rubber bullet? Do rubber bullets have signatures? And he goes, no, rubber bullets don't have signatures. And I says, really? The moral of the story is if you get big enough and you run your mouth and you tell 500,000 people in a city how to jump your children, not let them be corrupted in high school, and you tell them how to jump, there's local networks, Freemasons, enforcers, regulators, that will come and they'll send a message to you. What I think they planned on doing, what was their plan, was basically to fire that bullet through that window with a rubber bullet and hit me in the chest and sting me really good. And so you need to keep your mouth shut. But I got the message. The point is, you're not going to hear this type of information on main, even alternative networks, but like big networks, like Alex Jones or Jeff Rentz. They're only going to allow them to go so far before they actually react. So if you want to support where you get the real information, I mean, like no gates. I mean, look what we're talking about. We're talking about QAnon. We're going the whole way. I mean, we haven't gotten to the reptilian human hybrids yet. We can do that, but the point is that unless you have outlets like this where you can actually get the information, you're not going to get it. You're just not going to get it. So anyways, there's my big fundraiser. If you got honor, throw a few dollars at the station. If not, join the crowd, because it doesn't seem like human beings have a whole lot of honor. And I don't know what it is about us, but we're fundamentally flawed. Anyways, somebody else take the stick. Monty, go ahead.
Yeah. I like how
Revolution.radio and freedomslips.radio. That's where you can support us. Go ahead.
I listen to Viking show when I can, and I like how he puts forward the idea of using a prime number. There's an energetic background to it. So just $7, which will, may freak out the people who collect the money. Like, well, hang on, they're all sevens, but anything can help. Keeping us on air. Studio A and B, 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it's a kaleidoscope, because I'm sure my dream still is that we have a staff meeting, Mr. Rowe, maybe after the collapse of the economy, where everyone can travel for $5. We get every host in the same room, and yeah, that'll be a bun fight. And to answer your question before we went to the break, Mr. Rowe was asking about other countries and their stimulus. I can give the Australian, but I know you shared in the chat, so if you can follow on afterward, that'll be awesome, because it's too much numbers and stuff. The Australian aspect is that money-wise, we're very conservative, where we don't take too many risks, and we want everyone. We live in a country that everything can kill you, so if we don't have to worry about money per se, we can handle everything else, and the trees and the bugs and the animals and burning, scorching sun in the desert and everything else like that. The unemployment benefits have changed their name to Job Seeker. Very simple name. Used to get $550 Australian every fortnight. That's doubled now, so you get $550 a week. And I'm one of those. And believe me, we spend the money. So if you give I hate saying it this way, but the lowest economic people will spend money, and that generates because we're buying and consuming. Now, to save people's jobs, they've created a payment called Job Keeper, where you're getting paid, I think it's $1,500 a week to help businesses pay their employees so they keep their jobs. So when we come out of it, which I think they're aiming for September, the economic side of things. I'm not sure about the...
Also money.
Yeah.
Australia is basically mirroring what the economic plan was for the United States. It sounds like the same. Go ahead.
Well, we did have a $750 stimulus payment, as well as the Job Seeker and Job Keeper. It's not 100% perfect, and they're trying to battle it out. And so that's the Australian aspect where, of course, they're borrowing the money, and so we're sort of worrying about how to pay it back a little bit on. But people are bringing that up. So that's sort of where we're at. The thing, just to add very quickly, whatever if the new system kicks in, or if the new order kicks in, you've had people in shutdown for nearly 2 months, up to 3 months. Everyone's a bit cabin crazy. I don't see it working that well, because everyone's just going to leave their house and join together and hopefully have a peaceful revolution. So,
right, well, Monty, here's another point, and this is a major point. This is really, really big. So right now, worldwide, through this COVID-19 coronavirus, we've had about 170,000, I think that's what we're up to now, 170,000, 45,000 in the United States alone, but a total worldwide, 170,000. When the normal flu season, and the CDC keeps figures on this, is about 600,000. So here's my other problem. Who has got this kind of power that can take this, let's call it a super flu. It is real, because I've got a daughter that's a nurse, and she goes, no, they're there, but half the hospital's empty, mainly because no elective surgeries or whatever. In fact, in the United States, they're laying off healthcare workers. In fact, this $500 billion that they voted on, I think the whole healthcare industry is going to get a chunk of that. But the point is that who's got the kind of power? I mean, if we are at war, if QAnon, the White Hatters, the military, Trump, is at war, who at war against this deep state? How does this deep state have such power that they can shut down a total of 186 countries over basically a super flu, and using all their organs of the media to basically convince? I mean, it's like insane stuff. I was going to rent a tractor, another just quick story, and expand the garden. But anyways, my son, he says, Dad, you're going to flip the tractor and you're going to end up getting hurt. And, there's some dips because you're expanding it through this field or whatever. So anyways, I ran into this guy. He was willing to do it, come out here for 8 hours. And, he does it all the time. And so anyways, I called him and I says, can you do it? And he goes, yeah, I got a couple weeks open. I got a lot of cancellations and delays. And so I asked him, so this is a guy with a tractor in Northwest United States, Cascades, Washington State, that his job, basically, he makes fairly good living, is to go around and basically plow up gardens for rich people, because poor people, they'll rent their own tractor, like, what I was planning on before my son stepped in and he vetoed it. Anyway, so I says, you got 2 weeks, a lot of cancellations. I says, let me guess. That's the COVID virus. And he goes, that's right. And I says, wait a minute. You're like a guy with a tractor that shows up and plows up people's garden. You don't go in people's homes. He goes, oh no, I never go in people's homes, even if they invite me in. He goes, I never do that. So I'm saying, you're standing like 20 feet away from the door, and you're here to show up. They walk out with you, social distancing. They show you what you want to plow up. You plow it up. They give you the envelope because he's cash, and you walk away. And he goes, yeah. And he says, and I said to him, I said, oh, these people are canceling on you? And he goes, oh yeah, all these crazy rich lawyers and people. I mean, I can hear them when they talk to me on the phone when they're delaying it. They got the little muffler on. I says, in their own home. I says, you're kidding me. I says, really? And I thought to myself, who the hell has got the power to convince the 90% of the population of the earth to basically believe this? Where a guy with a tractor who works outside that does not engage people at all. I mean, it's like, that's the other thing against the whole Q thing, that they can take down the deep state. If the deep state can do that worldwide, 182 countries, and completely knock out a third of the worldwide economy, I mean, help me out here, Viking. What's the strategy? You're the Q apostle. Go ahead.
Well, if I may just step in very quickly, and then I'll hand the stick to Viking, is if you've got the right information, you've also got there is a virus out there and people see that, you put an element of doubt into their mind. And I think they're probably manipulating that. Viking, please.
Well, I think the main threat here is when you put the word bioweapon, then it becomes a whole different theater. And the campaign here was, I strongly believe this, that it was let out early. I really believe that they intended to let this out more around September, October, because the agenda that the deep state had was to create a virus, to create a vaccine, which, as I shared with Mr. Rowe, it's a bio nanotechnology. It's organic in form, and they were going to basically inoculate as many people as they could with this vaccine, and then with the 5G, it was going to activate a huge pandemic, and they were trying to orchestrate this around the time of the election. And number two was the Democrat Party wanted us homebound during the election to force their agenda to have mail-in voting, because it's the only way that they'll be able to, through subterfuge, gain or win the election for presidency is through manipulating and fraudulently coercing the votes in their favor. And so I believe when this was released and it became known that it is a bioweapon, everybody basically took their stance. And I think Trump used this strategically to catalyze all of his programs. And I have to agree with Mr. Rowe. Bringing Fauci into the scheme here was basically to expose the deep state. That was his whole agenda, bringing him in as far as managing the actual virus part of it. I'm not sure what stature he had, but he was like, the man in charge of this infectious disease control in the United States. Well, he's deep state. He wanted to extend it. They all want to extend it. They're all dragging their feet, wanting us to go into famine status, to create civil disorder, rioting on the streets. This is their whole deal. But so Trump is basically allowing, it was pointed out, these states to take control and to show their true colors. They're wanting to keep people confined, and they're shooting themselves in the foot. He's basically bringing his friends in, but bringing his enemies closer to understand their stratagem and to let them work out their devious deeds. But he's 2 steps ahead of them. He's 2 steps ahead of everything that they're doing. and this is like, as much as you might see him taking a left turn, he's actually taking a right turn two moves ahead. He literally has control over the situation in the United States and is influencing the entire global economic structure geopolitically. As was pointed out in the first hour, I do believe Putin and these major India and England, the Seven Eyes. I believe there's a faction that truly is on board with what's taking place here. Let them bail out all the banks. Let them put quadrillions of dollars into the system, because in about another 3 to 4 months, it's not going to make a difference. It's going to be a reset. They're going to reset everything to ground zero. This is year zero. We're in a brand new, in the precipice of a brand new paradigm of existence all across the board, geopolitically, geoeconomically, spiritually, our physical health, the health and well-being on this planet. Everything is in transition here. We're going from what Mr. O was pointing out, from a carbon-based, subjugated slavery reality into a crystalline, I believe it's crystalline, light awareness where people are awakening. The bubble is popping, and people are starting to awaken to the fact that they have been duped. And this is an amazing strategy that he's taken here. To let this thing play out as the deep state wants it to play out, but every turn that they take, they're finding themselves boxed in a corner.
Yes. Gone blank. That's good radio.
No, actually, Viking. Actually, I get this. It's only because I've had a lot of warfare through my life. I mean, like frontline warfare. People who know me know I've been like locked up 34 times. So actually, I know of the kind of concepts, the Sun Tzu type of reverse jiu-jitsu, aikido type of strategy, and there is some ring of truth to it. But what's happening now is getting to the point of what is the actual. So if we start to think about it, okay, you can run this strategy, and I understand it. Putting Fauci up every day, letting them see that little Jesuit guy, work his dark arts. Okay, you watch him the first time, yeah, that guy's really smart. Second time, yeah, I understand it. Let him talk the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. After a while, you're saying, what's this guy selling me? At about the 10th or 15th time, you're saying, you little rat, you're wrecking everything. So no, I understand that. But something's got to happen quick. And, and it's to the point now, Viking, that supposedly there's a lot of arrests going on of the pedophiles in Hollywood. But I'm almost looking at this as another part of the strategy to convince us, to basically put us in the kill box. Once they got the police, military, got them all the military equipment, the 5G's up, all of the military's laid out, they got all the systems. And so what they would do would basically sacrifice. If I was a warrior, I would sacrifice the Hollywood class of people, like, real big cases of, like Tom Hanks turns out to be a pedophile, and sacrifice them. That wouldn't even convince me. But we're coming up to the point now to where I'm hearing the cries of the poor and the working poor, and they're really feeling it now. I mean, they're down to like SpaghettiOs. They're down to buying SpaghettiOs and stuff. I don't even want to think of what they're down to in their cupboard. But at some point, my point is that what's your timeline? When is the final big break gonna come, in which the American and Russian, Putin and Trump military basically round up and basically cut this cancer out of us? What's the timeline?
It's happening now. I mean, you have to understand, America, the world's consciousness being in a bubble cannot handle the depth of the atrocities that have been committed. Just the atrocities the deviance, the deviance, and the absolute dystopia that has been put upon us as a human race. I mean, it's just beyond belief for most people. I mean, there's only probably 4%, that can understand the depth of this, because we've been researching this for years. We've been slow dripped in our research to the point where we can understand and handle it. You put this out to the public. I call it the bends. It's the information bends. If you get too much information, people would literally implode. So it's been this slow drip situation here, to where more. I mean, if you look at 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, the information that we have now is just beyond belief. I mean, it's beyond belief, but we've been able to assimilate it. So as far as the arrest goes, they're happening, and and it's from the bottom up, because you go from the bottom up because canaries will sing. They'll cut a deal. They've been blackmailed. They've been put in a situation against their will, and they're singing like canaries. And which you call Q, the Q League or the council has built their case. They know exactly where all the information is with the Clinton files and the deviousness of the Bush and Obama administration. They know it all, but it has to be done behind the scenes and then trickled out. Because we cannot handle it. We're so locked into our Super Bowl Sunday and Christmas and Easter and 9 to 5, and we work in the week. As the paradigm that's about ready to unfold is so beyond perception at this point that we have to meld into it. We literally meld into it, because life as we know it is no longer going to exist the way it was. And so this is a process. It's absolutely genius the way he's doing it. The fact that he's doing most of it behind the scenes and letting out these little bits and pieces and breadcrumbs, the Q drops are enlightening at least a part of us to understand that when this finally does come down, we'll be able to have enough information to be able to at least create a solace, at least in our arena of friends and family and community, because people are literally going to be fetal position, shocked and awed but what has been taking place. And he's creating this this meltdown. I mean, we have to be stripped. We literally have to be stripped and clean of everything that we thought was true to be able to understand this evolution of this new emergence in this new paradigm of existence. And I'm saying all across the board. It's not just the economics or the political, but it's the spiritual. It's the awakening of this planet. It is this carbon-based reality of subterfuge and slavery and pain and suffering into this brand new transition of trying to find some sort of reflection and calling in our passions, so we can engage in life with benevolence. If everybody was able to find their passion in this new crystalline state of the ones and zeros, the frequencies and harmonics, which is elevating outside of the subterfuge into our own understanding, our sovereignness, our self-mastery. We know that when we make a decision, it has to benefit everybody, not just benefit ourselves. That's the sociopathic carbon-based reality, is that people have made decisions that benefited themselves and backstabbed everybody around them. This is dropping away. We're going into this like unity consciousness where we are now trying to negotiate some sort of understanding that we all are in this together. We want to all survive, and we all want to be prosperous. And this is what is being manifested at this time.
What I do like is from the Native Americans, and I think there's a couple they know Native Americans that are in the chat room, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it has been said that when the elders or the council of the tribe had to make a decision for the tribe, they wouldn't look 4 years ahead or wherever, if they had elections, but they would look 7 generations down the line to see how it would actually play out. And so it's very similar to that. It's fascinating as well where people like ourselves, where we've been trying to wake people up and we share information, I think our mission will change, where we'll be not counselors, but will be here to help people who have that instant wake up and from all the information, and there'll be the shock and the trauma from it, because we've worked, decades, years, decades, multiple decades, learning this stuff and slowly assimilating the information and growing. A lot of people are going to
lifetimes.
Yeah, and so people are going to wake up in a nanosecond and they'll freak out, which is understandable. And so I watched a video, Remove the Shackles, Danny, she's awesome, where she said that we have to be calm, try not to say I told you so, but to help those people that are going through, and also going through the trauma of finding out all this information, as well as not let someone go down every rabbit hole, because we've done that, so we can say, yeah, that's true, don't worry about that, look at this. Like, the people are learning about Bill Gates. Interesting enough to add to that is that 2 to 3 months of people being on almost house arrest, they're getting cabin fever, and so they're being pushed into anxiety per se already, and so then this will come out where everyone's a bit jittery, and then this will come out. So you can imagine the response. Part of the awakening system is, and this is my final point in this section, is there is a skate park in Van Nuys where the county decided to fill it in with sand to try and stop people skateboarding there. And just little things like that is exposing the stupidity of what's going on. Over.
Right. And so here's another little thing that, that makes me wonder that we're not being put in a kill box. So right on the verge of singularity, AI, a lot of people got Alex in their house that can, ask her questions or questions or whatever. Right before robotics, we know they got them. We can see the robots. They got robots like Terminators that can actually, from an uneven platform, actually do a backflip and land on an uneven platform, something a human being would actually have a hard time doing unless you were an athlete. But so they got robotics, and so just right on the verge of singularity and robotics, all of a sudden we get this virus, everybody's at home, and now they're talking about I think it's called help me out here, Mr. Rowe, UIC, UCI, it's a universal income.
Oh, UBI, Universal Basic Income?
Yeah, that's it. And so now all of a sudden, through all this legislation that Monty talked about, what's happening with the Australians, us Americans, we got our $1,200 check. Now they're talking about actually going $2,000 a month for Americans. Now all of a sudden they come up with the UBI, Universal Basic Income Credit type thing, because they're getting ready to replace us with robotics in McDonald's, everything else, so that if we maintain this position for the next year, as they put the 5G up and they put the robots in to flip the hamburgers or whatever, that in 12 months, we're basically be pulling up to a McDonald's and a computer voice says, let me have your order. And then you'll pull up, you'll have a piece of plastic, digital currency. You swipe it. And then as you pull up to the window, an electronic or a robotic arm basically comes out with your bag of food, and then you take it, and then the robotic arm basically retracts, and we're in a completely different world that's run by corporations, big box, the Walmarts, Targets, Amazon, which, by the way, they were the big winners in this quarantine, along with Netflix. Basically anything that had to do with staying at home, any of those type of businesses, they were the big winners. So that's my other question. Right on the verge of singularity and robotics, all of a sudden we get a virus, we're quarantined, and we lose 30 million jobs, at least here in the United States. They say the jobs are not coming back, and now all of a sudden they're putting 5G everywhere. all these type of robotics. It's like they're actually changing. It's actually they use this coronavirus to actually retool and change the world economy over to AI, singularity, and robotics. So that's the other thing that I'm just concerned about.
Well, with the automation, I'll just say one sentence and then I'll pass the stick. With automation, though, people need to buy things. So you may lose jobs a certain way, but people still need to spend money to what's the word I'm looking for? To have the need of actually have the robot working. And you can see it in car lines and everything else like that. Viking or Roe, who would like to go first?
People are going to need to be trained also in the new technologies and the new paradigms. We're moving. If we move off of oil and onto different systems, there's going to be a need for people to run those systems. So I think that the robots can be utilized to free up the human beings so that the human beings can do more meaningful work, more meaningful tasks that require human hands. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do is, flipping a burger, if you aren't a human, okay, you might be taking it out of the hands of some teenage kid somewhere, but that doesn't mean you can't train that kid to start to learn a different sort of, type of job. Yeah. We're going to need, if we make, let's say, for example, we make cars and conveyances that are not using combustible engines. We're going to need mechanics or whatever for whatever types of devices that we're using, I would think.
Well, humanity has done that because if you remember well, you weren't there. Well, maybe you were, past lives. The Luddite riots when the steam engine came in the mid 1700s. They took away, like when technology came in, even the combustible engine and the car, like everyone had a barn and horse and farriers and everything else like that. Humanity adapts. I think what we're sort of asking is like, what will be those new jobs in that society? The interesting thing is, though, I don't see humanity flipping over so quickly. So it may be a battle to get to that because the boomer generation like actually having money and there's that freedom. Go ahead, HiJacker.
Yeah, no, Monty, I actually got a short story about what Mr. Rowe was talking about, is that you're actually going to train people for the new jobs. So this was like 20 years ago, okay, or maybe longer than that. I was a Babylonian slave and I was contracted out by Labor Ready to work on this production factory at night at Revlon, where they actually made, not only did they make like lipstick and makeup and, all the different things there, but they actually, they cooked them. It was in Jacksonville. It was a whole power plant where they would actually bring in, like really weird, they would bring in open tractor trailers, like it was a dumpster, except it was full of the fat and the carcasses of cattle. What came into one part of the plant, and then they would cook it down and they would turn it into lipstick. And then finally, where I worked basically was actually the final product, where they put like one little lipstick, you got the powder, you got like the gel, you got the perfume, and you put the whole box together. And I was on the assembly line. And so it's all automated. If you can think of a whole factory running in which all this stuff is coming together, and basically you as the human, you were putting all this stuff together in the final boxes. Then you send the box through, then it gets taped out, then somebody stacks it on a pallet, label it. But anyways, so our production line went down, and this guy shows up, and but because something messed up, and he broke out his tools and his computer or whatever, and he was trying to figure it out. Anyways, me being me, I went over and I started talking to him, and I says, so this is, there's like 50 people that are not working right now. I'm just curious. Do you kind of feel pressure on your job because you're the guy that's got to fix this machine to keep this production line going? And he goes, no, I don't think about it. I decided a long time ago when I did this job, at first it was a lot of pressure, I started drinking. I mean, the guy opened up to me, and then I went to AA, and I got my life right. And so I'm just not, I don't worry about it. So I'm talking to him, right? And then the manager comes up to me on the line, and she basically says, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Well," this happened to me on a couple of jobs. And I said, "Well, I'm just talking." And she goes, "You're just talking. Do you realize that man, what he's doing is costing $48,000 an hour?" And I just went, "Okay, all righty. I think I know what the deal is here." And so I slinked away. Because it was a fairly good paying job as a Babylonian slave. I think I got like $8 an hour when minimum wage was like $5.25 or something. But no, you're right, Mr. Rowe. As these robotics come on, you got to retrain the people the guys that actually fix the robots to be able to keep producing. So, anyway, I thought I'd give you that story. Go ahead.
It reminds me of a joke very quickly of a machine breaks down, they get a guy in, and he hits a hammer once on the machine, it starts to work again, and that's $1,000. $1,000? Well, it's $10 for the hammer and $999 or $990 to know where to hit the machine. So there's an element of knowledge there. Mr. Rowe, because we always joke that you have your Rowe Nation and your robots. What would you like to add to automation? Because it was going to happen anyway. It's once again, I can see a world government someday if it happens naturally. But what we've got is a small group of people pushing this.
50%, Monty, 50% of their jobs will be wiped out by 2025 through automation and robotics.
Yes. So where do we go from here, Mr. Rowe? You seem to be a Rowe type of guy.
Well, I mean, I think that that's just it. It's an open book right now, and it depends on how much of the new technologies are released. I mean, you know, who is occupying this new Space Force? Are they coming from the Air Force, the Navy, existing military? So we're going to need people in there. We're going to need people to manage the equipment. We're going to need people to work in the new places that are creating these things as the paradigm rolls out, and we retool manufacturing plants. You know, we're not going to be using plants to build cars with internal combustion engines as much. We might be making different types of devices. I'm also a little bit curious as to when we're going to see the robot armies that people have been working on, because there are companies that do have, you know, massive amounts of autonomous vehicles. There's actually something called autonomous warfare, and it is, or autonomous vehicular warfare, something like that, where it's warfare fought with machines, you know, and they're not remote controlled. They're autonomous. They do their own thing. They have, you know, capabilities of making decisions based on input and programmable missions that they can, you know, they can follow waypoints, and some of them can fly. They may be drones, or they may be robots. It could be mules. And HiJacker's right. I think it was Boston Dynamics, which for a while was bought out by Google, but I think they may have since broken off again. And I think there was a division of Raytheon that was working in the defense industry on machines. I remember when I was working at TRW, we had a call for white papers from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, that asked for autonomous vehicles that could manipulate all kinds of terrain and run an obstacle course. In fact, I went down there to, in the desert, they had a vehicular obstacle course set up, and all the different companies put their entry in, and whoever's vehicle did the best, you know, got the contract award, which, you know, the Defense Department pays, I don't know how many millions of dollars to the company that can build the best prototype and blah, blah. So the robot wars haven't started yet, and that might be what's happening underground right now. Like I said earlier, remember all the military vehicles that were moving around, and now we don't see them. Like we all thought they were going to be setting them up, you know, for the checkpoints and surrounding the cities, right? There was going to be what's going on with all these tanks and all these MRAPs, and they were moving through the street. Well, we see a few of them on the streets, but not the hundreds and hundreds of tanks like earlier. The last that was seen with a big cluster was a whole bunch of them in a quarry, which is an interesting thing that they're in a quarry. And are they now underground fighting robots?
Well, so these,
Right. And speaking of robotics, Mr. Rowe, you're right. The great and mighty king of Mother Russia, Vladimir Putin, he did make a statement saying, he who builds the most, well, he made a couple of statements. He who basically gets the AI first rules the world, literally, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But he also said, he who builds the most drones first will win the world, something like that. So they got the robotics. We've not seen it. It's not really come out in the open. And then also in Idaho, outside of believe it or not, it's called Moscow, Idaho. I actually been through there. In fact, I crashed with my 5 children, 2 dogs, and a screaming wife in a puke yellow school bus at a church there, and did some work for them. They gave me enough cash to finish the trip on to Seattle. But anyways, in Moscow, Idaho, recently in the last week, they did have an unusual earthquake. It didn't have any sine wave, and so some people speculated were there a nuclear blast underneath the ground, and then there was quote unquote the shock waves, which looked like in several different places there was also explosions. They weren't the 5.5 that happened in close to Moscow, I think, Idaho, but they were 3.1, 3.4. So, and I thought to myself, Idaho, there's not a whole lot of earthquakes there. And then the way the signature wave is, and I'm thinking, is there like a battle going on underneath the ground? So, yeah, go ahead.
So going back about 8 years when the whole Nibiru thing was alive and well, they basically drained our treasury of trillions of dollars, and they spent all this money thinking that the world was going to come to an end. I mean, this is literally the Air Force was instructing all of their officers to move to I think it was Nebraska. That was the safest place in the United States because of its
Missouri. That's terrible.
No, it wasn't Missouri. It was Nebraska. But the point is that they had built these underground. They had taken all that money and built these underground tunnels, starting from Denver to Seattle to what. You could drive 2 semis in these tunnels, and they have grab trains all the way to Atlanta. I mean, they have underground cities that they had built to house the elite when this happened. I mean, they were really convinced this is going to, and that was the timeline. That was a timeline that was supposed to manifest, but we shifted it in our conscious awareness to where that overage is not going to occur. They didn't want humanity to be wiped out again. So the Galactics basically did a trajectory on Nibiru and sent it on its way, so it would not affect us. But the point is that they set up all these tunnels, and this is how they get a tank in these tunnels. Because again, 2 semis can pass in these tunnels. They're huge, and what you're seeing here is they're blowing them up. So it's not nuclear, but they're definitely doing thermite bombs, and they're collapsing these tunnels. They're collapsing these bases. There's bases in there where they're doing their slavery and pedophilia and drug trade, and they're housing all this nefarious activity. So you're seeing these earthquakes around the United States, but they're not earthquakes. They're actually blowing these bases up as they move in and move out. And they've already got, I think the total is 10,000 children, but there's like so many just piles of dead bodies and mutilation and just dehydration. So they're pulling these children out, and pulling the trafficking out, and destroying and leaving waste. So I mean, it is happening, and they're doing what's known as a sweep. They're doing them huge mop up of these tunnels.
Well, Monty, you're going to have a real hard time finding a title for this, but
I've got one.
Think about Q. Throw Q Q wars in, secret wars, underground bases. So, look through your words as you title this thing, but you got a winner here, which, by the way, Monty, do you got a PayPal account, how people can actually throw you a couple of dollars?
Yeah, it's waferthin@iprimus.com.au.
Wow. Why would you come up with that? Talk about lack of marketing. Say it again. Spell it out. I mean, God, my God. Nobody's going to remember that.
Well, I have mentioned it before, but PayPal, I've set up a business account, which I think I can use a name thing, but PayPal just uses your personal one. They use your email. But Waferthin is WAFERTHIN at iPrimus, which is IPRIMUS.com.au. And the title I got so far is the coming economic collapse, and I may put in some secret wars at the end of it to sort of, because that's the first hour and this is sort of the second hour. We have about 6 minutes to go as well.
If you use Q, you'll get a lot more hits. It's one of those things.
Yeah, I may put it in the form of a question. Economic collapse, comma, Q wars, question mark.
So the other thing is, I believe that underground they have an ally, because you see underground it's not as peaceful. Also, some of these underground cities are run by hybrids and Draco reptilians are in charge, while other ones are run by different groups. One of these other groups is called the Terran Sauroids, which are descended from dinosaurs, and they, I believe, have allied with the Trump faction and the Templars from the surface, and are working against the Draco reptilian factions, which have allied against with the bankers, of course, and the death cult. So that's part of what we're seeing.
Yeah, but that's more of a inner Earth culture. There's the skin of the Earth where we've been tunneling like moles, and then there's the whole races. There's 7 races that are in inner Earth. Agarthan, the Tlosians, the Agarthans, and your race. There's 7 major races that are actually do want
you think that's
our planet to become sovereign. But my point is that this what you're referring to is a lot deeper. Has nothing. I don't feel it has anything to do with the tunneling of the moles that have been occurring.
Well, I wonder if it has anything to do with Trump wanting Greenland, because the entrance is up there in northern Greenland area, and
a little further north, yeah.
So it would be, I think it would be wonderful if the new paradigm included a diplomatic relationship with the Agarthans, and then maybe we could take trips down in there and see the wonders that actually
they're preparing for that. They want us to get through this encumbrance or this overage first. But yeah, they are preparing for what you would call terrestrial tours.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That's what I want to see. I want to see the inner Earth.
It's very quickly say from the last 5 minutes, an observation that popped into my head is that it sounds like that we're at a crunch time on the surface where if a certain faction wins, they could lay waste and just scorch Earth policy, and everyone on the planet, however far down you want to go, has decided no, now is the time to stop this.
Exactly.
Because that's what I find it interesting, that there's a lot of duality going on where New World Order, mass arrests as an example, and I think that's why we're having trouble / interesting moments of just trying to observe and see what is unfolding. Now we've got about 3 minutes to go, so a minute each. Final thoughts, gentlemen. Who would like to go first?
Well, let me.
Go ahead, HiJacker.
Yeah, make sure you support the station. Go to revolution.radio or freedomslips.radio. There should be a place where you can actually donate. And if you want to remain anonymous, there's somebody you can actually, snail mail, send some money to, where you don't got to put your name on it. You're only going to get this kind of information off of, small websites like this, even though we got a lot of people in here now. It's nothing compared to like an Alex Jones. So this is where you're going to actually get it, because you get much bigger and they start locking you down. And so I think tomorrow night I'm going to actually do a round table. If Tones doesn't produce for me, Mr. Rowe, you might have to jump in. I think it's tomorrow night. I'm not even sure. I got talked into it. I don't know how I got talked into it, but
Yeah, it's tomorrow night.
you know, around. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's tomorrow night.
Okay, it's tomorrow night. Wow. Okay, so, anyways, now what I believe we're actually in purgatory. I believe that the Earth is flat. That these Draco reptilians are actually of the Canaanite or the serpent seed line. That's who's ruling over us. Just want to put that in as a disclaimer for the show. But everybody rolled from their different points of view. But so what I'm telling you is what this life is about. It's about your soul. And so you got to go to Yeshua, the only begotten Son of God, and to Yahweh. And that's what this is about. This is we've all been put here because we're all rotten. We all know it. And this is the final test. But anyways, there's my minute. Go ahead, Monty. God bless everybody.
Thank you, HiJacker, for coming on. Viking.
Yeah, so we do a council meeting every Friday at let's see, it'll be 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. Western Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be going under the understanding the evolutionary process as we awaken into a unity consciousness of the Ascension 5D paradigm. That's going to be our topic. It's been a great show, gentlemen. You know, we're all hoping for the best. You know, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And I think we're going to be able to make it just fine here.
Thank you, Viking. Mr. Rowe.
Yeah, well, I do agree with Jacker as far as this incarnation is definitely a choice of paths, and we all, you know, choose our path and move on to graduation where we incarnate into another realm and time and place. But right now, I think maybe this is a blessing in disguise. So right now, all we can do is take a deep breath, sit back, and reflect on ourselves, and let's see how we come out, you know, in a few weeks on this as we go into summer. Yeah, if you want to listen to my show, it's 5 p.m. Pacific time on Studio B on Thursdays, where it's all kinds of different subjects and topics. Sometimes I have a guest. This next one, I'm going to be talking about the Tatarian history of San Francisco. And I got interested because I'm actually less than 1 hour away from San Francisco proper, and so I grew up in that city. So it should be an interesting show. I've done a little bit of research and got some stuff I'll share in the chat.
Well, Mr. Rowe, check out the 30 photographs of San Francisco in 1856. You're not going to believe it.
Oh, I have. It looks like Dresden.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
incredible.
There's no way that they could have, with a population of from 1,000 people, built a city in that short of time that looked like that.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. He's always about the studio here at Revolution Radio, mainly because we've duct taped him to the chair and he can't get out. So I'm just putting that out there. You have been listening to Planet Collingwood. My name is Monty Dean. You're awesome. Thank you for listening. If you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe, leave a nice comment, and share, because this is great information, and I believe we're at that time that we're not going to wait. Also, if I may say, from a positive angle, whatever our belief system is, or finding out what is going on, we will find out what is going on. And that much I would say, everyone listening, either recordings or live, we're going to get answers at the end of the day. And I'm glad that we're all together to find out, so we can go, oh, okay, it's, bananas are supposed to be orange. There you go. That was Planet Collingwood. As I said, we'll be back in 6 days and 22 hours. You're listening to Revolution Radio. I'm not sure what's going to be happening for the next 2 hours. Maybe a moment of zen. Maybe Ro will put on another show. And then Kelsey Sweet with Cultivating Consciousness is on in 2 hours. So thank you, ball boys. Thank you, linesmen. Thank you, everybody. Don't succumb to fear. Have fun. Be aware. And love the ones you're with. Yeah, and vote banana. We'll see you soon. Good night.